Metsola, it's widely expected von der Leyen's hour-long address to MPs will have a considerable focus on both Russia's war in Ukraine and the related energy price crisis for EU households and businesses. There we can see the President mingling with other MPs before she takes to the stage. Her guest of honour today is Vladimir Zelensky's wife, who will be reporting straight from Strasbourg. Von der Leyen is expected to outline her thoughts and priorities on how to assist Ukraine in its war against Russia and shield European households and businesses from crippling energy costs and record inflation. The State of the Union address is an annual event which allows MPs to hear the Commission President's plans and priorities for the year ahead and then ask reaching questions. It's anticipated this year's speech will focus in a substantial way on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Once again, you're watching Euronews now. We're live in Strasbourg, where the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will deliver her annual State of Union address to the European Parliament this morning. The theme of EU solidarity with the Ukrainian people is expected to be a constant throughout the speech. You can see people here wearing the colours of the Ukrainian flag, the yellow and blue. The Commission President is already on record as saying that the unity of purpose can defeat Russian blackmail on gas prices. So what has the Commission done since its last speech, and what does it plan to unveil today? Well, the war in Ukraine has derailed the Commission's plans for the past 12 months, but it still ticked a few things off its to-do list. We saw COVID-19, rule of law and defence were some of the areas in which the Commission made strides. This year's speech is expected to focus around Russia's war in Ukraine and the related energy price crisis for EU households and businesses. Von der Leyen will outline her thoughts any moment now and her priorities on how to assist Ukraine in its war against Russia and shield European households and businesses from crippling energy costs and record inflation.
Good morning, dear colleagues. Can I ask you to take your seats?
First up, we'll hear from the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola.
Dear colleagues, good morning. Can I ask you to take your seats, please? Once again, good morning to all of you, dear colleagues. First of all, I am pleased to welcome the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, to our European Parliament for the annual State of the European Union address. It is also very much a special honour to have Olena Zelenska with us on this important day. Dear Olena, we are with you and with the Ukrainian people. We are here today against an alarming backdrop of an illegal, unjustifiable invasion of sovereign Ukraine, high inflation, electricity and energy price rises, a climate catastrophe, increased food insecurity and a fast emerging cost of living crisis. I think our message today will be that Europe will respond. And to underline how we will do that, it is my pleasure to give the floor to the President of the European Commission to deliver her 2022 State of the European Union address. Dear Ursula, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Supply of hydrogen using money from the Innovation Fund. You will be able to invest €3 billion to help the Nations Conference on Biodiversity, which will take place in Montreal this year. And we will do the same at the COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh. But in the short term, we also need to be better equipped to face up to climate change. No country can combat the weather on their own and the destructive force of extreme weather events. This summer, we sent Greek aeroplanes, Swedish aeroplanes, and Italian aeroplanes to combat fires in France and in Germany. But these events are becoming more and more frequent and more intense. Europe needs more capacity. That's why today I announced that we will double our capacity for firefighting. Over the course of the coming year, the European Union will buy 10 light aircraft and 3 additional helicopters to complete its fleet. That is European solidarity in practice.
Honourable members, the last years have shown how much Europe can achieve when it is united. After an unprecedented pandemic, our economic output overtook pre-crisis level in record time. We went from having no vaccines to securing over 4 billion of these life-saving vaccines for Europeans and for the whole world. And in record time, we came up with SURE so that people could stay in their jobs even if their companies had run out of work. We were in the deepest recession since World War II, and we achieved the fastest recovery since the post-war boom. And all that was possible because we all rallied behind a common recovery plan. Next Generation EU has been a boost of confidence for our economy, and its journey has only just begun. So far, 100 billion euros have been disbursed to member states. This means 700 billion euros still haven't flown into our economy. Next Generation EU will guarantee a constant stream of investment to sustain jobs and growth. It means relief for our economy, but most importantly, it means renewal. It is financing new wind turbines and solar parks, high-speed train and energy-saving renovations. We conceived Next Generation EU almost 2 years ago, and yet it is still exactly what Europe needs today. So let's stick to the plan and bring the money to the ground. It has to be delivered because it's necessary now as investment. And, honourable members, the future of our children needs both. That we invest in sustainability, but also that we invest sustainably. We must finance the transition to a digital and net zero economy. And yet, we also have to acknowledge a new reality of higher public debt. We need fiscal rules that allow for strategic investment while safeguarding fiscal sustainability. Rules that are fit for the challenges of this decade. And therefore, in October, we will come forward with new ideas for our economic governance. Let me share a few basic principles with you. Member States should have more flexibility on their debt reduction path. But there should be more accountability on the delivery of what we have agreed on. There should be simpler rules that all can follow to open the space for strategic investments we needed and to give the financial markets the confidence they need. So let us chart once again a joint way forward with more freedom to invest, that's necessary, more scrutiny on the process, what has been agreed has to be done, more ownership by member states and better result for the citizens. So in short, let's rediscover the Maastricht spirit. Stability and growth can only go hand in hand. Because, honourable members, as we embark on this transition in our economy, we must rely on the enduring values of the social market economy. It's the beautiful, simple idea that Europe's greatest strength lies in each and every one of us. Our social market economy encourages everyone to excel, but it also takes care of the fragility as human beings. It covers the big risks of life, like poverty, sickness, age. It rewards performance and guarantees protection. It opens opportunities, but it also sets limits. And we need this today even more than ever. Because the strength of our social market economy will drive the green and the digital transition. And our Achilles heel for the small and medium enterprises are basically three things. It's, do we have an enabling business environment? It's the question, do we have a workforce with the right skills? And do we have access to raw materials our industry needs? This will be the three crucial questions to answer right now, to have a future with the model as I've described right now. We must, for our SMEs, remove the obstacles that still hold them back. They must be at the center of this transformation, because they are the backbone of our industry and Europe's long history of industrial prowess. And they have always put their employees first, even and especially in times of crisis. But inflation and uncertainty are weighing especially hard on them. This is why we will put forward an SME relief package. It will include a proposal for a single set of tax rules for doing business in Europe called BFIT. It will make it easier to do business in our union, less red tape, better access to the dynamism of our continental market, and, honourable members, it is high time that we revise the Late Payment Directive, because it's simply not fair that 1 in 4 bankruptcies, that's 25% of all bankruptcies, are due to invoices not being paid in time. This can't be possible. For millions of family businesses, we have to revise this Late Payment Directive. This will be a lifeline in troubled waters. Meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren Abgeordnete,
Ladies and gentlemen,
das zweite Thema ist das große Thema Mangel an Personal.
The second big topic is the lack of staff for our companies. That's a major challenge for European companies. The number of unemployed has never been so low, 6.0%. 6% unemployment, that's a good thing. But at the same time, the number of unfilled vacancies is at record levels. HGV drivers, airport staff, nurses, engineers, IT technicians, right from unskilled levels to the highest university degrees. We need people at all levels, and we need to invest more in further education and higher education. We need a careful knowledge of what staff are needed and how we can fill those vacancies. We need to combine that with the wishes of workers for their own careers. We've got the ESF, that's a great instrument, and at the same time we need a structure that ensures that the money is effectively used. And there's another important point. We need to get qualified staff from abroad that can strengthen Europe's growth. So an important step is to ensure that these people can get their qualifications recognised more rapidly in Europe. That's one way to make Europe more attractive for everyone who's got skills and that wants to be part of Europe. So I propose that the year 2023 should be Europe's year of education and training. That is the right priority. It's a step forward.
Und meine Damen und Herren Abgeordnete, der dritte Punkt.
Members, ladies and gentlemen, third point is very important. Our small and medium-sized companies, all of our industrial sector, well, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about chips and augmented reality, storage for solar power facilities, but access to commodities, to raw materials, is decisive for the success of our transformation to a sustainable and digital economy. Lithium and rare earths are going to be more important soon than oil and gas are today. Our needs for raw earths alone, so rare earths alone, will be multiplied fivefold by 2030. I think this just shows how rapidly we're moving forward on the European Green Deal. The problem is that at the moment there's just one country that almost completely controls the entire market. We need to avoid finding ourselves stuck in dependence, of the kind of dependence that we now see with oil and gas.
Dazu müssen viele Schritte getan werden.
A lot of steps must be taken on that front. But trade policy comes into question there. We need new partnerships. Geographically, these raw materials are not just located in one place on Earth. We need new partnerships, not just to strengthen our economy, but also to pursue our interests and values at the global level. With similarly minded partners, we can work beyond our borders to improve labour and environmental conditions. We need new, reliable partners where we can mutually grow. The agreement with Chile, Mexico and New Zealand will be put forward for ratification, and we will continue negotiations with partners like Australia and India. We need to learn from the mistakes of the past.
But securing supplies is only a first step. The processing of these metals is just as critical. And today, China controls the global processing industry. Almost 90% of rare earth and 60% of lithium are processed in China. So we will identify strategic projects all along the supply chain, from extracting to refining, from processing to recycling, and we will build up strategic reserves where supply is at risk. This is why today I am announcing a European Critical Raw Materials Act. We know that this approach can work, because remember, 5 years ago, Europe launched the Batteries Alliance. And soon, 2/3 of the batteries we need, we will produce here in Europe. That's a big success story. Last year I announced the European Chips Act. And the first chips gigafactory will break ground in the coming months. So we now need to replicate this success for raw materials. And this is also why we will increase our financial participation in the important projects of common European interest, the so-called IPCEIs. And for the future, I will push to create a new European Sovereignty Fund, because we have to make sure that the future of the industry is made in Europe. Honourable members, as we look around at the state of the world today, it can often feel like there is a fading away of what once seemed so permanent. And in some ways, the passing of Queen Elizabeth II last week reminded us all of that. She is a legend. She was a constant throughout the turbulent and transforming events in the last 70 years, stoic and steadfast in her service, but more than anything, she always found the right words for every moment in time. From the call she made to war evacuees in 1940 to her historic address during the pandemic, she spoke not only to the heart of her nation, but to the soul of the whole world. And when I think of the situation we're in today, her words at the height of the pandemic still resonate with me. She said, "We will succeed, and that success will belong to every one of us." End of quote. She always reminded us that our future is built on new ideas and founded in our oldest values. Since the end of World War II, we have pursued the promise of democracy and of the rule of law. And the nations of the world have built together an international system promoting peace and security, justice and economic progress. Today, this is the very target of Russian missiles. What we saw on the streets of Bucha, in the scorched fields of grain, and now in the gates of Ukraine's largest nuclear plant, is not only a violation of international rules, it is the deliberate attempt to discard them once and for all. That we have to know. And this watershed moment in global politics calls for a rethink of our foreign policy agenda. This is the time to invest in the power of our democracies. This work begins with a core group of our like-minded partners, our friends in every single democratic nation on the globe. We see the world with the same eyes. We share the same values, and we should mobilize our collective power to shape global goods. We should strive to expand the core of these democracies. The most immediate way to do this is to deepen our ties and strengthen democracies on our continent. This starts with those that are already on the path to our union. We must be at their side by every step and every day, because the path towards strong democracies and the path towards our union are one and the same. And so I want to know the people of the Western Balkans, Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia, to know, and I think I speak in the name of this noble house, you are part of our family, you are the future of our union and in our union, and our union is not complete without you. This has to be the message. And we have seen that there is a need to reach out to other countries of Europe beyond the accession process. This is why I support the call for European political community, and we will set out our ideas to the European Council. But our future also depends on our ability to engage beyond the core of our democratic partners. Countries near and far share an interest in working with us on the greatest challenges of this century, such as climate change and digitalization. And this is the main idea behind Global Gateway, the investment plan I announced last year right at this place. It is already delivering on the ground. Together with our African partners, we're building 2 factories in Rwanda and Senegal to manufacture mRNA vaccines. So they will be made in Africa, for Africa, with world-class technology. And we are now replicating this approach across Latin America as a part of a larger engagement strategy that has to pick up now urgently. All this requires investment on a global scale. So we will team up with our friends in the United States and our friends in the G7 partners to make this happen. In this spirit, President Biden and I will convene a leaders' meeting to review and announce implementation projects for this investment. Honourable members, this is part of our work of strengthening our democracies. But we should not lose sight of the way foreign autocrats are targeting our own countries. Foreign entities are funding institutions and institutes that undermine our values. The disinformation is spreading from the internet into the halls of our universities. Earlier this year, the University of Amsterdam shut down an allegedly independent research centre, which was actually funded by Chinese entities. And this centre was publishing so-called research on human rights, dismissing the evidence of forced labour camps for Uyghurs as rumours. These lies are toxic for our democracies. And let's think about this. We introduced legislation to screen foreign direct investment in our companies for security reasons. That's correct, that's good that we did it. But if we do that for our economy, shouldn't we do the same for our values? We need to better shield ourselves from malign interference. And this is why we will present a Defence of Democracy Pact. It will bring forward covert foreign influence. It will shed the light on shady funding. We will not allow any autocracy's Trojan horses to attack our democracies from within. For more than 70 years, our continent has marched towards democracy. But the gains of our long journey are not assured. And many of us have taken democracy for granted for too long, especially those who, like me, who have never experienced what it means to live under the fist of an authoritarian regime. Today, we all see that we must fight for our democracies. Every single day, every single minute. We must protect them both from the external threats they face, but also from the vice that corrode them from within. It is my Commission's duty and the most noble role to protect the rule of law. So let me assure you, we will keep insisting on judicial independence. And we will make sure that we protect our budget through the conditionality mechanism. And today I would like to focus on corruption with all its faces. The face of foreign agents trying to influence our political system. The face of shady companies or foundations abusing public money. If we want to be credible when we ask candidate countries to strengthen their democracies, we must also eradicate corruption at home. And this And this is why, in the coming year, the Commission will present measures to update our legislative framework for fighting corruption. We will raise standards on offences such as illicit enrichment, trafficking in influence, abuse of power, beyond the more classic offences such as bribery. And we will also propose to include corruption in our human rights sanctions regime, our new tool to protect our values abroad. Honourable members, our founders only meant to lay the first stone of this democracy. They always thought that future generations would complete their work, and that's true. We have to do that. It's an ongoing process. Democracy has not gone out of fashion, but it must update itself in order to keep improving people's lives. You will remember these words. These are the words of our friend David Sassoli, a great European. Democracy has not gone out of fashion, but it must update itself in order to keep improving people's lives. David Sassoli thought that Europe should always look for new horizons. And through the adversity of these times, we have started to see what our new horizon might be. A braver union, closer to its people in times of need, bolder in responding to historic challenges and the daily concerns of our Europeans, and to walk at their side when they deal with the big trials of life. This is why the Conference on the Future of Europe was so important. It was a sneak peek of a different kind of citizens' engagement, well beyond election day. And after Europe listened to its citizens' voice, we now need to deliver. The citizens' panels that were central to the conference will now become a regular feature of our democratic life. And in the letter of intent that I have sent today to President Metsola and Prime Minister Fiala, I have outlined a number of proposals for the year ahead that stem from the Conference on the Future. They include, for example, a new initiative on mental health. We should take much better care of our friends and partners and beloved ones. And for many who are burdened with anxiety and who are lost, appropriate, accessible, that's so important, and affordable support can be life-saving. We know that this support is not there today. Excessive, affordable, and appropriate support. So we have to make sure, with proposals on mental health, that we really improve in this subject. It is, for some of our fellow Europeans, life-saving. Honourable members, democratic institutions must constantly gain and regain the citizens' trust. Just like Europeans did when millions of Ukrainians came knocking on their door. What we saw was and is Europe at its best. A union of determination and solidarity. But this determination and drive for solidarity is still missing in our migration debate. Our actions towards Ukrainian refugees must not be an exception. They can be a blueprint for going forward. We need fair and quick procedures, a system that is crisis-proof and quick to deploy, and a permanent and legally binding mechanism that ensures solidarity. And at the same time, we need effective control of our external borders, in line with the respect of fundamental rights. I want a Europe that manages migration with dignity and respect. I want a Europe where all member states take responsibility for the challenges we all share. I want a Europe that shows solidarity to all member states. We have progress on the pact. We now have the roadmap, and we now need the political will to move forward and to match. Honourable members, 3 weeks ago, I had an incredible opportunity of joining 1,500 young people from all over Europe and all over the world that gathered in Tesi. They have very different views. They come from very different countries. They speak different languages. They have different backgrounds. And yet, there's something that connects them. They share a set of values and ideals. They believe in these values. They are determined to reach them. They are passionate about something that is larger than themselves. And this generation is a phenomenal generation. It's a generation of dreamers and makers. And in my last State of the Union, I told you that I would like Europe to look more like these young people. We should put their aspirations at the heart of everything we do. And the place for this is in our founding treaties. Every action that our union takes should be inspired by a very simple principle, that we should do no harm to our children's future, and that we should leave the world a better place for the next generation. And therefore, honourable members, I believe that it is time to enshrine solidarity between generations in our treaties. It is time to renew the European promise. And we also need to improve the way we do things and the way we decide things. Some might say this is not the right time. But if we are serious about preparing for the world of tomorrow, we must be able to act on the things that matter the most for people. And as we are serious about a larger union, we also have to be serious about reform. So as this Parliament has called for, I believe the moment has arrived for a European Convention. Honourable members, they say light shines brightest in the dark. And that was certainly true for the women and the children fleeing Russia's bombs. They fled a country at war, filled with sadness for what they had left behind and fear for what may lie ahead. But they were received with open hearts and open arms by many, many citizens like Magdalena and Agnieszka, two selfless young women from Poland. As soon as they heard about trains full of refugees, they rushed to the Warsaw Central Station. They started to organize. They set up a tent to assist as many people as possible. They reached out to supermarket chains for food and to local authorities to organize buses, to hospitality centers. In a matter of days, they gathered 3,000 volunteers to welcome refugees 24/7. Honourable members, Magdalena and Agnieszka are here with us today. Please stand up. Magdalena, stand up. Stand up. Their story is about everything our union stands and strives for. It is a story of heart, character and solidarity. They showed everyone what Europeans can achieve when we rally around a common cause. This is Europe's spirit, a union that stands strong together, a union that prevails together. Long live Europe. Thank you.
You're watching Euronews now. We're live in Strasbourg, where European Commission President von der Leyen Ursula just delivered her annual State of Union address to the European Parliament this morning. In the 1-hour-long address to MEPs, there was considerable focus on Russia's war in Ukraine and the related energy crisis Europe faces.
Madam President of the European Parliament,
to hear from a debate between MEPs coming up shortly.
Czech Presidency, dear colleagues, last week the hemicycle in Brussels was full with young people. We organised the EPP Group a Youth Week at the beginning of the autumn session, and during the discussion, Eva Majdel, a young colleague of ours, spoke about a moving encounter during summer. She was in Bulgaria, in a supermarket checkout, and there was a young lady. She didn't speak very well Bulgarian. She talked with her and was a Ukraine refugee. Young, talented. She was excited to start her university studies, and then war, fleeing, losing loved ones. She was from Mariupol and ending up in uncertainty. That is the brutal reality of Putin's war. And on the other hand, in my constituency, I received a letter from a small bakery. After decades of baking Bavarian bread, he wrote to me, he cannot survive with the high energy costs. The baker told me, Putin is a war criminal, no doubt about this. But how can I survive? These two stories mark the challenge in front of us. And our EPP answer is, we need a winter of solidarity. Solidarity, first of all, with Ukraine, more weapons, more money, more solidarity. Putin must lose, Ukraine must win. Great news from Ukraine that they are pushing back the Russian troops from their soil. And Madam Zelensky, we admire what your soldiers are doing there on the front line. Thank you for this. And dear friends, solidarity among Europeans. Nobody left behind. We care for the poor in our societies and help our economies, especially the SMEs. Crisis times means now leadership. And the EPP supports the proposal of the Commission presented today on support for Ukraine, but also to give an answer on the soaring energy prices. But there is more to do. The markets, dear ladies and gentlemen, are obviously speculating against European solidarity when winter will really be hard. And let's be concrete. It is not normal in a market that Scholz has to call Macron to open a gas pipeline. And we would be more independent if Spain would be better connected to the European gas market. And dear friends, if it is true that the winter will be hard, then we must use all our energy resources. Germany cannot stop producing nuclear electricity and, on the other hand, ask the Dutch to ask for gas solidarity. That's not the case. And let's be honest, it was a lost summer. The EPP has been asking for an extraordinary council meeting to give certainty, to structure things, to show everyone that we are united and you cannot split up Europe. And the signal would have had already lowered the prices. People are paying because politics was and is, for the moment, among member states, not strong enough. And dear friends, on inflation, not only driven by energy, first it's an ECB task, that's clear, but I think we also can contribute. One example, we have a global food crisis, and that is also increasing the prices for our citizens. And the Commission is now presenting new regulations which will limit food production in Europe and produce more bureaucratic burden for our farmers. For new legislation, the Commission promised the principle of one in and one out. If we continue like this, then at the end of the mandate we will arrive to 5 in and only 1 out. Dear friends, we have war in Europe, and parts of the Brussels community are continuing to make new laws and new burdens as nothing has happened. That's why we as EPP Group are asking for a moratorium on new legislation. Let our business, especially the SMEs, do their work without burdening them. And for creating growth and having recession now in mind, we as EPP stand for creating a union of democratic economies on global level. Europe is a trading continent, and if we want to limit our dependency on the autocracies, on China and others, and that is the lesson we learned out of the Russian gas war, then we must speed up on trade deals with other democracies. And as EPP we always did so, but I just want to remind ourselves about the CETA debate in this House, where the left, Greens and part of the Socialists were opposing to doing a trade deal with Canada. Canada, dear friends, you frightened Europeans with misleading arguments and even with lies, and until now Scholz and Macron are not ready to ratify CETA on national level. But they are great in doing pictures with Trudeau. That is not serious, dear friends. That is not serious. And about democracies, yes, Madam President, you spoke about defending rule of law, and with you as Commission President, and I have to say also in Poland with friends like Donald Tusk, we as EPP, we are fighting for rule of law. You stopped the money as EPP President of the Commission to Poland and Hungary. That's why we are very, very proud about this. Rule of law must be judged and based on clear criteria, fair procedure, and must be blind, like justice, without looking at party books. And speaking about democracies, I have to come back to the energy proposals. And, Madam President, we spoke about this. You have our full support on the procedure, but on the content, but on the procedure, I have to say, we have to respect the European Parliament as a people's chamber. Can you imagine a windfall tax and a price cap being decided on national level without the vote in the national parliament? We would call this a democratic problem. But now we have proposals on the table who are doing this on Europe, and that should not be the new normal on European level. So decisions without the European Parliament should not be the new normal in Europe. And that's why please consider again the legal base for the proposals on the table. The EPP stands for a democratic Europe, and that means a Europe where all legislation is voted in this chamber. And then finally, during the COVID crisis, dear friends, we were ready for doing bigger steps. CRRF, proposed by Ursula von der Leyen, is bigger than the Marshall Plan was. So we changed the architecture of Europe. That was great. But today, war is back in Europe. There was no council meeting on coordinating our defence activities. Only words. There is no initiative to stop unanimous vote on foreign affairs. Only a speech from Chancellor Scholz in Prague. No convention to strengthen the European democracy requested by this chamber and the Conference for the Future of Europe. Only, I have to say, campaigning in Paris. The Commission has to launch now, until December, a European Defence Action Plan as a concrete initiative in this field, to invest together, to build up a European missile defence system and a cyber brigade, to make Europe stronger on this. And we need, and thanks for your clear statement, a convention now. EPP stands for a more ambitious Europe. The times of Sunday speeches are over. Europe will be not saved by university pulpit speeches, but by political leadership. And the Ukraine refugee in Bulgaria and my baker, they believe in this and they understand this. That's why leadership and leadership now.
Thank you very much. Manfred, I now give the floor to Irache Garcia Perez, chair of the S&D Group.
Gracias, Presidenta Metsola.
Thank you, President Metsola, President von der Leyen, Czech presidency. I'd like to start with some word of thanks to Magdalena and Agnieszka for your commitment, your solidarity, but above all, because you're a clear example of the history of Europe. Europe who has always shown welcomes to people, who've always opened their arms to those who are fleeing war and hunger. Europe who wanted to demonstrate that solidarity is one of their values. A mixed Europe, a multiple Europe. A Europe that we remain extremely proud of, so thank you. It's very difficult to assess the state of the Union without repeating the words that we've been saying for a very long time now. We're facing historic challenges. We saw that in the COVID pandemic, and we're now facing challenges with the war that was started by Vladimir Putin, who is threatening our values and the international balance. That's why it's so important that we maintain our unity and we strengthen our commitment to freedom and the integrity of Ukraine. And at the same time, we have to act quickly, with ambition and solidarity, in order to reduce the social and economic effects of this war. You just have to go to the supermarket to see that the typical shopping basket prices are increasing every day. Measures have been taken to contain inflation, but the price of food and energy are increasing with no limit. The European Central Bank has increased the cost of capital, but this means that mortgages are going up without even referring to heating bills. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the state of our union. Let's be clear. Being clear, however, doesn't mean that we should be pessimistic nor fatalistic. We're here to find solutions, to try to find solutions which do exist. We also have to ensure that we have the political will to implement those solutions. As always, crises make our weaknesses clear, but they also show us where we need to act. We have to strengthen our social policies, reform the energy market, reform fiscal and economic governance, and to accelerate the green transition. We can't leave it too late. Our commitment to the Ukrainian people is clear. However, to get the support of the European citizens, we don't just have to celebrate military victories. We also have to ensure that we put ourselves in the shoes of those who are suffering from this war, including those in the European Union, because without that, we're going to see a backlash against the war, as well as populism and the extreme right. President von der Leyen, we have always been loyal partners during the pandemic, and we will be again now to tackle this crisis and to avoid recession. It's late in the day, but I'm very happy that finally we are seeing a reaction and that you have listened to the proposals that have been made by the Socialists and Democrats by a long time now. We have to cap gas prices and help families and businesses to make sure they can pay their bills. To do that, we have to do that partially with the extraordinary windfall profits of the energy companies. Everyone has to do their bit. It's not fair that some people have difficulty reaching the end of the month, and yet others are profiting from the suffering of these families. We are not the centre of the world. I've just come back from Latin America, and this should be a priority for the Union. At the moment, it's not. I was happy to hear Madame von der Leyen refer to Latin America. It shows that we need more cooperation. Latin America is a natural ally in the global order. We have to be more present there and not leave a void that can be filled by other powers. I'm concerned by the rise of the extreme right. We have to stand firm on the rule of law, and the Commissioner von der Leyen is the guarantor of principles and the treaties. We have to be very clear and firm on this. To conclude, leaving aside institutional issues, I want to talk about the political situation that we're facing at the moment. I'm saddened to have to say this, but the state of our democracy at this historic moment, I think, is just as fragile as our economy. Ghosts we thought were in the past are coming back. Some member states are becoming autocracies, such as Hungary under Orban, and other pro-fascist parties can win elections. This is dangerous and worrying. Mr. Weber, members of the EPP, I'm standing here urging you to reconsider your role in the European project. After the Second World War, the founders of Christian democracy understood that the best example of patriotism was to work for the common interest of the whole of the European Union, together with social democracy, not an exclusive nationalism. I see that you are losing your way and normalising the entry of the extreme right into these institutions. I hope you will put this right. I hope that you will find your way, because we have a shared responsibility. Europe is counting on us.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Garcia Perez. Now, on behalf of the Renew Europe Group, the Chair, Stéphane Séjourné.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam
Madame la
President.
Présidente, 200 jours que le peuple...
200 days now. For 200 days now, the Ukrainian people has been fighting the Russian aggressor. For 200 days they've been fighting for their freedom and for our freedom. Their struggle is ours. It is the struggle of democracy against autocracy, the struggle of the rule of law against the law of the strongest. It's the freedom against oppression, our union against its enemies.
anti-européens.
The last few months we've held the line all together. But now the populists are coming up with very dangerous proposals. War isn't just sanctions, but this war is having consequences on the daily lives of our citizens, the quantity of energy, the quantity of food available, maybe in future the jobs available in Europe. We need to respond rapidly and well. Europe can be effective, and your speech, Madam von der Leyen, it proves this. Your proposals are good, and I'd like to thank you for the democratic exercise that you've just embarked upon. All of these projects are ones that we support, and particularly on the main front we face, which is the energy front. We're in favour of a European energy shield to reduce bills. And I think there are even two forms of European solidarity. European solidarity with Europe's citizens and SMEs, using the windfall profits from the energy companies and setting a cap on gas imports. The second form of solidarity is solidarity between the member states and our neighbours. We need to make joint purchases of energy. We need to invest surpluses into investing in renewables and renovation of buildings. That is an objective for our group. We want to make our continent the first one to abandon fossil fuels. But out on the extremes, there are these very glib solutions. They say get rid of the sanctions, as if the sanctions were the cause of Europe's problems. Even if Russia's GDP has fallen by 6%, the Russian army is trying to get resupplies by Iran and North Korea. We've received information yesterday about the kinds of huge figures, 300 million euros, that have been sent to European political parties in Europe and abroad to carry out interference. The European Parliament should deal with this. The institutions should deal with this. There are proposals against foreign intervention in Europe. Our group supports those proposals. We need to work harder on this because it's a democratic challenge primarily. The other main issue is sovereignty. Sovereignty means that we should reduce all of our dependencies. Well, in the food sector, I could just mention that. We can't risk a breakdown in food supplies. We need to work upstream on raw materials, health, digital sector, infrastructure, defence. My group is in favour of a new action plan to identify our vulnerabilities and to try and reinforce our value chains within Europe. As a union, every single question we need to be asking ourselves this question, and of parliamentarians in particular. Will the decision we're taking make us more sovereign or more dependent? We propose a sovereignty test to test the conformity of the whole European acquis, of any new European legislation that we have put together between the Parliament and Commission. We need to check our budgetary lines, our investments for the future, in line with the sovereignty test. Now, all of our public policies have to be aligned with the strategic autonomy objective. That's the only way to ensure that the EU is not just an economic power, but a geopolitical power. And that's something that you stressed before this plenary at the beginning of your term in office. We need to guarantee equality and quality of life for our citizens, economic growth, the green transition, and our place in the world. All of these proposals raise a fundamental question for our institutional and budgetary framework. The Union has shown that it can show agility and flexibility over the last few months. But the question is not just the question of the convention that you're putting forward. First of all, when we'll be able to, how long we'll be able to continue deciding things by unanimity and at what price? And then if we are to invest together, we need to know what priorities we're picking out. That's what we need to know before we launch a convention. That is what we need to know before we go before the Council. We have been among the first to call for a conference on the future of Europe, calling for a review of our budget. And a convention can follow that up. I'm sure that you'll find that my group's position is clear and will not surprise you. And I'm sure you won't be surprised that I raise the rule of law. The rule of law has to be our compass. It has to guide our actions beyond our borders and within the European Union. I'm thinking particularly of Mr. Orban. Now, for 10 years, we've been looking the other way. This indifference has led to corruption and discrimination spreading wildly in the country. The media is under state control and spread Russian propaganda. There are problems elsewhere too, in Poland in particular, which is a very different case. But all of this kind of backsliding has to be combated. Other countries are moving into unknown democratic terrain, such as Italy. We need to hold firm, Madam President. We are counting upon you. We are counting upon all of the College of Commissioners. Multiple crises are springing out that the approach that you took in 2019 is the right one. The transition, democracy, Renew is proud of what we've already been able to achieve. We've got through these crises, and we will give you our support for concluding the projects that you've put forward to us. We shall not hesitate, we shall not delay, and we shall not forget how important it is for us to work together in this new international situation. I think we are up to the challenge, Madam President.
Merci beaucoup, Stéphane. I give the floor now to Ska Keller, the Head of the Green Group.
Dear Commission President, dear colleagues, and dear Ms. Zelenska, it's a big honor that you are here with us today, and your presence reminds us that while we talk a lot about the problems that we're facing in the EU, the real consequences of this war of aggression of Putin are carried by the people in Ukraine. A brutal invasion led against the peaceful people of Ukraine simply because they chose to live in freedom and democracy. And Putin cannot live with the fact that people live in liberty, with human and civil rights, and that nations work together peacefully. Freedom and democracy, principles the EU was founded on, are the biggest threats to him. And all together, we must face this atrocious aggression with determination and with courage, just as Ukraine is showing us. Europe needs to support and continue to support Ukraine in their fight for peace and self-determination, and even scale up those efforts. And the past days have shown that the Ukrainian people are able to resist the attack, and it is now that Europe needs to stand by their side, by your side. While Ukraine suffers most from the attack, there is also consequences for the EU. We must be prepared for tough times ahead. To do that, we must show solidarity to the outside, but also to the inside, by ensuring that the costs and consequences are carried by the stronger shoulders in our society. With the skyrocketing energy and food prices, we must act. We know that many citizens in our union are fearful of what the winter will bring, fearful of being unable to heat their homes, feed their children, pay their bills. And we cannot turn a blind eye to the situation of the most vulnerable people in our union. Already now, every fifth person in the EU lives in poverty, and the scale of the increasing prices means that many more households will be at risk. It is our duty to ensure that people who are struggling get support, and that the greed and profits of a few don't lead to misery of many. So let's take bold policy steps to make sure that everyone gets through these tough times. And I welcome the Commission President's proposal to skim off windfall profits from energy companies, something that we as Greens EFA Group have been calling for since the beginning of this crisis. The only true way to end our energy dependency is, on the one hand, to use less energy, and on the other hand, to produce more renewable energy. Sun and wind provide us with much more power than we could ever possibly use. So let's profit from that. Fossil fuels have been a driver for ecological disaster and for dangerous dependency. Renewables are the true catalyzers for peace, security and stability. Now is the time to scale up investments into renewables, to put solar on every roof, insulate buildings and make sure sun and wind carry us into a new era of sustainable and affordable European energy production. And let's make no mistake, Commission President and colleagues, the climate crisis is probably the biggest political test for our generation. All over Europe, we experience the devastation the climate crisis is bringing and will bring to our continent and to the world. This summer, massive droughts and heat waves have paved the way for wildfires, killing a substantial amount of our harvest as well, and led to thousands of deaths that came prematurely. The cost of non-action is immense. It is time to act and to quickly build a brighter, cleaner future, to capitalize on the enormous potential that the green transition brings in terms of sustainable economic development, well-paying and future-proof jobs, cleaner air and better quality of life for our citizens. Dear colleagues, dear Commission President, Putin's war against Ukraine is also targeted at our EU values and at democracy. In order to stand strong against opponents and threats, we have to defend those values within the EU and without exception. And I'm grateful for your strong words on rule of law, Commission President. However, we have heard very promising words before. What we're lacking is action. Thanks to Parliament, we have instruments at hand, but now they need to be used, including the rule of law conditionality. Dear Commissioner President, please respect the conditionality instrument and the political will of this Parliament. No money should be given to the governments of Poland and Hungary unless they clearly return to the path of rule of law. And I want to tell to our dear colleagues from the EPP, and especially to you, Mr. Weber, be careful whom you form partnerships with. Looking at Italy, you are playing a risky game with democracy and with our shared values, just for power. A game that could backfire for all of us. A group that claims to be part of the democratic majority should not partner with people who wear Putin fan shirts, nor parties with fascist logos, not in Italy, not in Spain, not in Sweden, not in the EP, nowhere and never. And it is a bit awkward that I say this as a Green. But the centre-right has a very important role to play in Europe. And part of this, together with all of us, is to ward off the extreme right. And if you open the door to them, you are doing a big, big disservice to Europe, but I believe also to your own party. Dear Commission President and dear colleagues, yes, the State of Union is full of challenges stemming from the war in Ukraine, to the rule of law, to the climate crisis. We are facing a big test. However, I am convinced that the EU has the strength to face these challenges if we work together. Work together towards a new energy independence, a climate-neutral continent, and, maybe most importantly, for a European Union that deserves and maintains the trust of our European citizens, founded on values, founded on solidarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Keller. And now I give the floor to the chair of the ID group, Marco Zanni. Onorevole, prego.
Grazie, Presidente. Madame Zelenska, benvenuta.
President, Madam Zelenska, welcome. It's important that you are here today, and what's also important is that today we have heard that in this institution, in this chamber, there is full transversal support for Ukraine against Russia, and that will continue. Before I go into the topics that Madam von der Leyen raised, I would like to make a suggestion to our Green and Socialist friends. Given that they have no new ideas, they continue to warn against the threat of fascism in Europe. You just have to speak to citizens, to businesses. I can promise you that none of them are concerned about a fascist threat. What they are concerned about is that they are having to deal with the damage caused by years of devastating policies that have been put forward by these groups in Europe. Now, on what President von der Leyen has said, it was a nice speech that we listened to, but unfortunately, President, it is merely a speech. It's just words. You said that the Commission is going to be putting forward some measures to try to face up to this tragic situation, one like this continent has never experienced. But these measures, if I may, are far from being enough to bring genuine support to the blameless people who are suffering because of this tragic situation. Businesses are closing, production is stopping, shops are shutting, and citizens can no longer make ends meet because the cost of living is increasing exponentially across Europe. And now, as you said, it's true that the main blame for this does not lie in Europe, but the unjustified aggression that we've seen. But since the 24th of February, Europe has been responsible for protecting its own citizens against the consequences that we could all imagine and that we were all aware from the beginning could arise. Europe can be blamed for not having acted quickly enough. You just recently said that democracy has a price. If we want democracy, then there are certain procedures that we have to follow. Dialogue, discussion, then action. However, this cannot be used as a pretext for not acting and for not taking the responsibility that lies with European institutions. Gas price caps is the only measure that may somewhat help our citizens and businesses against the crisis that they are experiencing. But yet this remains something that is merely rhetoric, it remains merely words, it's just discussed, but it's discussed in terms that does not give hope to those people who are suffering all too clearly because of the crisis. They are crying out for help. People are asking for rapid action. And in light of that, I would like to make another comment, reflecting more on the internal mechanisms of the European Union, and picking up on something that you've been saying since 2019. In my country, we say that only stupid people can't change their minds. I think the European Commission has to look at how many proposals from the pillars of the 2019 programmes and look at what needs to be changed, what needs to be reviewed. If you look at the world since 2019, since these plans and programmes were put together, the world has changed entirely. And we know that that world is not going to come back. We're not going to go back in time. So on the Green Deal and other trade policies, Europe and the Commission are going to have to be pragmatic and look at the fact that the situation is different. You need to have a long-sighted view and understand that conditions have changed and that some plans cannot be implemented anymore. These plans have not helped to protect the climate, they have not helped with an economic, socio-economic or industrial transition, and that's what we need so desperately right now. Thank you.
Grazie Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. President von der Leyen, on behalf of the ECR Group, I would also like to wish a warm welcome and offer my full support to Mrs. Zelenska. At this moment in time, it's important that we send out a clear message from this plenary of support to Ukraine. Your State of the Union address this year is probably the most difficult one that you have made in recent years. The context is very complex, not only because of what's happening in the present days, but because we have a difficult period behind us, first the pandemic and then the outbreak of war. So I think it's important that in these circumstances we need to clearly condemn the actions of Russia and the behavior of Russia. We have full support and solidarity in facts and in words with Ukraine, in our everyday actions on behalf of the government and the European institutions. It's very important to work hard right now because the issue of Europe's defence and foreign affairs policy has to be transformed, particularly with the transatlantic alliance, where we need to bolster the relationship with Europe's countries. We now need to provide full support to the difficult path that we have taken on sanctions. Only sanctions can bring results, and at the same time, we need to look at our daily lives. We need to act with unity and in a timely manner. Mrs. von der Leyen, we need genuine unity and not just a facade of unity. We need to intervene to support households and companies. That's essential in taking on the crisis we have before us. We need clear answers. A gas price cap is one of those clear answers, and uncoupling the gas price from the energy price in general. I'll give you a clear example, a specific example of the kind of speculation we face and the need to intervene. Over the last few days, on the 9th of September, we saw a Council of European Energy Ministers who sent out a positive and clear signal. But immediately after, on the 12th of September, the gas price went below €200. On the 26th of August, it was over €330. But now gas prices are increasing again, because the message that the markets are getting from the EU is not strong enough. We need a strong answer now. Member States need to be conscious of the difficulties that we have ahead of us, so we need to act in a timely manner. All of the planning, the cohesion planning for the 2022 to 2027 period, the recovery plan, a lot of this will depend on what happens now, because the planning was done before the outbreak of war. We need to work with conviction towards ensuring we have genuine unity within the EU. I've listened carefully to declarations from other colleagues around the plenary, the presidents of the other groups. I understand there's a need for political polemics to go on because of national elections that are upcoming in many countries, but that's not the path we should be following. I'd like to thank the support that we've had for Ukrainian refugees. The two ladies who are with us today have set an excellent example. But you have to remember that there are countries like Poland who have opened their arms wide. They have shown exceptional efforts in terms of welcoming refugees escaping from Ukraine. We need to be conscious that unity cannot be achieved by seeking conflict. It has to be true and substantial. The rule of law is important, but we cannot allow the debate on rule of law to be contaminated by ideological issues. That brings nothing positive. Colleagues, over the coming months, we will be working on a lot of issues together in our common interest. We don't need this kind of political polemics. It shows immaturity and a sense of irresponsibility. We want a serious Europe that is capable of working together with national governments. That is the path we should be following. In this context, I hope that we can find a good, balanced approach. Democracy isn't just for when it suits you. It's not just for when people vote the way you want them to vote. Whether we lose or whether you win an election, you have to respect the citizens' mandate to its politicians. That's the only way we can have a serious and credible Europe that can take on the challenges of the future. Thank you.
Grazie, Onorevole Fitto. Now I give the floor to Manon Aubry on behalf of the Left Group.
Madame la Présidente von der Leyen, chers collègues, Madame Olena Zelenska, à quoi bon un discours de politique générale si ce n'est pour répondre aux préoccupations quotidiennes des citoyens européens?
Speech, and the objective must be to look after the interests and respond to the concerns of Europe's citizens. I've come here with the bills that people have asked me to show you. This bill from Gregory, it's a gas bill, €2,130. People who are worried about not being able to heat their homes this winter. And there are millions of people like Grégoire and Brigitte. The prices are skyrocketing, and it's not just energy prices.
2 fois moins vite que l'inflation, la hausse des prix. Les dividendes des actionnaires, eux, ont explosé de 29%.
Rising, people's salaries are stagnating, and yet shareholders are cashing in.
Comme dirait un certain Emmanuel Macron. Pendant que 99% des citoyens tirent la langue, une poignée de milliardaires enchaînent les allers-retours entre Paris et Ibiza.
Billionaires
d'entre eux aussi
jetting around the planet,
qui sont arrosés largement, le tout en pleine sécheresse et en pleine canicule. Voilà l'état de votre
out on the golf courses,
Madame von der Leyen. Et je regrette que vous n'ayez pas parlé de ces gens-là et que vous ayez d'ailleurs assez peu parlé des questions sociales dans votre discours.
Everyone else is in sweltering heat. But there are other people too. And the crisis is not just a result of the terrible war in Ukraine and Putin's blackmail. This crisis has happened because we have an economic system that does not work, as you have had to admit today.
Déjà, première nouvelle, vous reconnaissez qu'il
Let's start with taxing mega profits, and for the first time you've accepted that multinationals are making mega profits. Please tell Bruno Le Maire, our Minister for Finance and the Economy, who doesn't seem to have noticed. This House has been asking for the taxation of mega profits, and it's good to see that there are people listening, and I'm glad that we're winning this cultural battle.
Mais je dois d'ailleurs saluer votre créativité
I congratulate your linguistic creativity.
En cherchant comment éviter de reprendre
I can imagine you looked in a dictionary of synonyms
en inventant
to
contribution des profits exceptionnels.
avoid the word mega profits. your reference was to exceptional profits. But this shouldn't just be about fossil fuels. It should be all of the companies that have benefited from the crisis, be it the shipping sector, be it the banking sector, be it the luxury goods sector. It shouldn't just be energy companies that are taxed.
Célébrons au début de votre mandat les vertus du marché.
I see at the end of your term of office, you're
qui illustre à elle seule la crise de votre système.
Extolling the virtues of the market. And yet we have a crisis.
L'Union européenne en est à réduite
the European Union is having to cross its collective fingers in the hope that we won't all be having blackouts this winter, that we'll have heat and light. Your model has failed.
En laissant quand même des marges énormes à ces entreprises, des fois qu'elles se soient pas suffisamment gavées. Les rustiques ne suffiront pas. Il faut bloquer les prix au niveau d'avant-crise et sortir l'énergie du marché.
Not enough. We have to stop the prices rising.
La lucidité tardive et partielle ne suffit pas, Madame
that you've realized
de la cohérence.
Past mistakes, but you need consistency for the future. And you didn't say much about the climate today. We've had the hottest summer in history in Europe. And here you go with your free trade agreements.
Vous demandez encore de vider la mer à la petite cuillère, si dans le même temps vous vous entêtez à importer du lait et de la viande de Nouvelle-Zélande à littéralement 19 000
km. The planet is burning, and yet you want to import milk from the other side of the world through your trade agreements with the likes of New Zealand.
Revient vite au galop. C'est d'ailleurs
l'histoire avec la pandémie. We have to do better in protecting the natural world.
Retournez ensuite.
It was the same with the pandemic. There was a quick initial response and then a quick return to business as usual. And you're talking about reforming the budget.
You
talked about a convention on the reform of the treaties, but you've ignored the findings of the Conference on the Future of Europe. There just isn't time to keep kicking the can down the road. In fact, you're a prisoner of a liberal world view which is collapsing around you.
Et je regrette, comme mes collègues de ce point de vue-là, que la droite ait fait choix de s'allier à l'extrême droite, parfois ici,
It's a great pity that the right of this House is aligning itself with the far right. The right has chosen its side. We are on the side of solidarity. And President von der Leyen, how many more crises is it going to take before you really learn the lessons of this failure?
Tisztelt kollégák, először engedjenek meg egy megjegyzést a zöldek képviselőjének hozzászólása kapcsán. Magyarországon a szocialisták és demokraták között a liberálisok
belong to the S&D group, the liberal groups, and the political parties belonging to the Green group have been in a close political alliance with the anti-Semitic political party called Jobbik. So, if you are against cooperation with the extreme political forces, then you'd better look at your own courtyard first. Madam President, we Hungarians have suffered German and Soviet occupation, so we know all too well what it means to fight aggression, to fight for independence. As the son of Holocaust survivors, I understand the cruel destruction of war. We all stand with those under attack. When the sanctions were adopted at the beginning of the summer, the Commission told us that these sanctions would bring Russia to its knees. You promised us that sanctions will hurt Russia, not European citizens. You promised us that sanctions will end the war. The end of the war is nowhere in sight, while energy prices continue to skyrocket. All this time, Russia happily pockets windfall profits from the energy markets. The sanctions have brought us galloping inflation, which pushes Europeans into poverty, while Russia is getting richer. Europe faces an energy shortage and energy crisis. Madam President, this is not what the Commission promised us when you introduced the sanctions.
I now give the floor back to the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I want to thank all the presidents of the groups for the broad coalition supporting the proposals of solidarity for the vulnerable households and companies. And yes, we know time is of the essence, but when I look at Madame Aubry, the bills you have shown to us, yes, in French you would say, ils sont insupportables. This is right. But you know what? Send those bills to Moscow. That's where they belong to. That's where the source is. I have a plea to this Parliament. You all rightly so say, speed, speed, speed. Time is of the essence. You've done phenomenal things with the digital COVID certificate. Please do that again with Repower EU. Because you're all rightly so calling for investment for renewables, also cross-border projects. Here are more than 300 billion euros that could be invested to cross-border projects. You're calling for the permitting process that it has to be sped up. Well, the permitting process, the reform is in Repower EU. You're calling for stabilizing the ETS prices. It's in Repower EU and 20 billion fresh money. So please speed up. I have the same call and plea to the European Council and the Member States. Please speed up because we really need you to do again a miracle like in the COVID times. Now, Stéphane Séjourné, you're right, we must call out Putin's lies, and I want to look at the issue of food. Nothing in our sanctions prevents Russia from exporting food and fertilizers to vulnerable countries. We have to say that over and over again because it's the truth. And Russia just says the opposite, which is a lie. Russia has blocked Ukrainian harbors, a very simple truth. And our solidarity lanes, together with the UN deal that was really helpful, have now enabled that more than 10 million tons of grains have left Ukraine. Today, 30% of Ukraine's grain exports are going to low and middle income countries in Africa, Middle East and Asia. So it's Ukraine's grain that has made prices drop again. Prices for maize and wheat have decreased by 20%. They're almost back to pre-war levels. So we should be very clear in our messaging. Fact is, Putin has created the food crisis. Europe and the United Nations are working to put an end to that. That's the truth. And on agriculture, Europe is a top agri-food producer and exporter, and that's a great pride. And it gives a special responsibility in times when so many countries simply don't have enough food. This is why, as you know, we have decided to allow the cultivation of any crops on set-aside land for the next harvesting season. We know that farmers are also coping with high prices for energy and for fertilizers, and therefore less than a month into the war, we triggered for the very first time the crisis reserve under the Common Agriculture Policy. This frees up to 500 million euros for the most affected farming sectors, and Member States can top this up with another 1.4 billion euros for European rural development funds. Keep in mind, Member States can also use the revenues from the solidarity contribution we just put on the table as a proposal of the oil and gas companies to support fertilizer production in Europe. But finally, and again this goes for the whole energy crisis, there's one simple truth that applies to both energy and fertilizers. The more we save, the less we pay, and the less fossil fuel-based fertilizers we use, the less dependent we are on fossil fuel imports. In the last month, globally but also across Europe, each and every one of us felt more clearly than ever before the immense impact of the global climate crisis, and you've mentioned it all. The heat records, the heavy rain events, the floods, the devastating droughts destroying crop and livelihoods. They urge us to move more swiftly than ever together. We need a resilient and sustainable agriculture that preserves biodiversity and, above all, the healthy, fertile soil. And that can cushion all the aforementioned disasters. Therefore, our discussions on chemical pesticides and mineral fertilizers are crucial, using the natural resources entrusted to us in a careful and preserving way. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. I give the floor now on behalf of the Council, the Minister of European Affairs, Mikolas Beck.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Where the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has delivered her annual State of the Union address to the European Parliament. We just heard from 8 MEPs in the State of Union debate, a chance for them to scrutinise the European Commission's results and priorities and contribute to setting the EU's policy direction. The President has just responded. She's announced that the EU will donate €100 million for the reconstruction of Ukrainian schools from Russia's war in Ukraine. She also says the EU has imposed the toughest sanctions the world has ever seen, describing Russia's industry as in tatters. We also know she says the European Union's eastern neighbours that their future lies in the EU, whilst announcing new trade deals with Chile, Mexico and New Zealand. And she's also stressed the importance of a digital and sustainable economy. Once again, this is Euronews Now, live from Strasbourg, where the European Commission President has delivered her State of Union address. Find more details at euronews.com.
Taking a high toll on our populations, especially the most vulnerable, and on our economies.
Good morning, Europe. It is Wednesday, the 14th of September. I'm Helena Humphrey, and here are your top stories.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky vows that normal life will return to recently liberated areas as soon as possible after a stunning counter-offensive. The coffin of Queen Elizabeth II returns for a final night at Buckingham Palace before lying in state ahead of next week's funeral. And Serbia's authorities cancel a large gay pride event in Belgrade, saying it's too dangerous to hold, leaving organisers furious.
These are the remnants of Russia's occupation of northeast Ukraine. Tanks and other vehicles abandoned after its forces made a seemingly hasty retreat.